All right. Hi, everybody, and welcome. I'm here with Rosalie. Thank you, Rosalie, for being here.
Thank you for having me. I've been looking forward to this all week.
Yeah, this is going to be awesome. So, we've got people on Facebook, welcome, and people watching on YouTube. And all of you folks can post questions or comments in the chat box, and we will try to talk about those things. But I think just to get started, Rosalie, I would love for people to see some of your work, like maybe something recent or something that you're really proud of or really excited about, just to kind of give people a taste of what you're up to.
Sure. Well, I have some of my more like nature illustration work here. I just finished up something that I'm excited to share with you all. This is a sneak peek. I was like, give things away before I should, but I think this is okay to share. So I just kind of started a gig working with a local brewery, and we're working on a series that's featuring the watersheds in this area. So it's all year long. Every month a new can and brew comes out, and it highlights a different aspect of a healthy freshwater ecosystem. So this is the first label for...
Whoa.
So this will kind of give an overview of the entire watershed in Western Pennsylvania. So I have all the little tributaries and some of the main rivers. And you can see Pittsburgh is on there right there. And I pulled out some of the rivers that have really nice views, and a jewel-winged damselfly. I have some grasses, native grasses that help to contribute to a nice, healthy riparian buffer. And I have a little darter fish there as part of it. So this will go on a beer can that's coming out in just a couple of weeks. So.
That is so cool. That's such a creative use of nature illustration also, and also feels like something that is really meaningful in terms of reaching the public. And is that you also had a fish, some other type of fish that you were doing with that company? Is that correct? I think on your Instagram you posted some.
That was actually with the West Virginia Rivers Coalition, and that was a candy darter, which is endangered in West Virginia. The rainbow darter is not endangered in Pennsylvania, but it's still a fish that's really important to protect. So I really like darters because they're really small, and a lot of them have really cool colors that kind of look tropical, especially in the middle of like Appalachia, where you don't expect really colorful fish. So
cool.
Yeah.
Wow, that is awesome. So I think that the next thing I would love to hear about is sort of like your origin story, or like how you got started with this kind of work, because I think a lot of people who are younger might be like, how did she start making art for like beer cans or things like that? So could you explain a little bit about your origin story?
Yeah. So I've been doing art my whole life, and most of it has been analog, drawing, painting, throwing in a little bit of ceramics in college, but mostly I've really liked watercolor since I was like 8 years old. It just kind of communicates the visuals that are going on in my head in the most effective way for me. But when I was younger, I liked to draw and paint all sorts of things, from architecture to people to animals, and sometimes plants around my yard, or just whatever I was seeing. Sometimes I'd like make up weird little stories that had fake characters with fake names, and just, I just like to draw all the time. And so I always knew that like art was kind of my thing, but I didn't know that it could be a career. And I didn't know how to like settle in on a niche with art. So I went to college for graphic design because I knew that like that's a job that I knew of some graphic designers. I didn't know any illustrators growing up because I grew up in a rural area where there just aren't very many at all. So I went to school for graphic design, but in all of my free time, I was drawing and painting and taking as many like hands-on illustration classes as I could. And throughout late high school and college is when I really started to cultivate a deep love for nature. And so it's fun because you can kind of, if you're looking back through my old work from childhood, it starts out like all these people and architecture, and then into high school, as I started to spend more time outside, all of these nature themes started to creep into my work. And now it's pretty much all that I do. And I do still like to paint and draw people, but it's just, I've found that like, I think painting and drawing nature, it has given my art kind of a purpose and a niche, and like, it feels like I'm not just creating things for fun, but like there's a deeper reason. And yeah.
Wow. Yeah. Well, it sounds like the having a meaning to your work is really important for you. So could you talk a little bit like on your website, I think this is on your website or on your Instagram, it says Rosalie is a conservation-focused illustrator who specializes in creating vibrant, hand-painted visuals to help people see and appreciate the natural world in a deeper way. Can you explain like how you came to think of your art as being able to do that? Or why do you think your art is able to do that?
Yeah, I think that it took me learning how to see the world in an artistic way and like with a sense of like reverence and awe. And that's not something that I was born with. I think I'm naturally predisposed to kind of like to observe things and kind of lay low and watch as things unfold. But I think over time, I began to notice more in the outdoors, and I just began to feel really strongly that like a lot of people are walking right past so many incredible wonders in nature and not taking time to notice them. And I wasn't for most of my life. And so watching just how like I felt like my life became more enriched by spending more quiet time in nature and using art to document what I was seeing encouraged me that like other people can learn it too. It's not like you're born with this deep understanding of nature or you're not. Like it's a learned ability, and it really makes life feel a lot more rich, at least for me. So I think the combination of choosing to work with clients that are have like conservation missions, that's one part of what I do, and then just personally exploring and painting what I see is another way that I can kind of invite people into that world. And then the third way that I try to do that is through teaching my own workshops and classes and just like showing people what I've learned and how it's helped me. So.
Wow. Yeah. And I think that's really interesting that you share that you didn't always see things this way, and that your personal experience of using art and using drawing in nature has helped you see more, or just spending more time or paying attention. That's really cool to hear that. And I think there was also something on your, can't remember if it was on your website, where you said that this type of like paying attention in nature had like a real important therapeutic role for you when you were struggling with some health stuff. So whatever you're comfortable with as far as sharing around that, could you speak to that at all?
Yeah. I mean, that's a big reason that I am motivated to continue to spend a lot of time outside, is because I'm a chronic migraine sufferer, and I have been since I was 11. And I had a neurologist in high school who suggested that I spend more time outside instead of taking naps when I got migraines. And that was when I was 13 or 14 that I had that like recommendation from that doctor. And so before, I would just take a nap immediately as soon as I got one, because I had a hard time seeing, like my vision was impaired when I had migraines and all these things. And it really, really helps. Like this morning, I woke up with a migraine. I went to a state park and I hiked for most of the day, and I feel so much better now. And it just like, it's a simple act, and I feel very thankful that I've had the access to drive to natural places and feel safe in the outdoors. And I grew up on a farm where I was able to just go out my front door and see trees. So those are all things that I'm super, super thankful for, because yeah, I don't know what I would have done without like feeling that relief that comes with nature. And I'm not sure what exactly is going on in my brain that helps with migraines so much, but it really is like almost immediate relief. And yeah, it's pretty amazing. So that's another like motivator for me to share this like love of the outdoors and want to protect the outdoors, because I just know that it has so many healing benefits, whether that's like from physical pain sometimes or like emotional trauma. Like it's just such a healing, amazing thing that most of us have access to. So I want to protect it.
Wow, yeah, that's really inspiring. Have you seen or have you met like other people who have had similar experiences? Like I know I talked to Beth Ann Burton from Australia, and she had some health issues, and nature journaling and just nature kind of like therapy in an unstructured way, just like spending time outdoors was really helpful for her. Like, have you had other experiences or met other people who have had similar therapeutic value from it?
I don't know that I have actually.
Hmm.
I have read some articles though that have talked about how just like a 20-minute walk at lunchtime can significantly reduce stress levels in most people. So I know that there have been studies done on it. But
Yeah.
it would be cool to meet other people that have also been drawn to nature because of migraines. I'm sure there are others.
Yeah, that's really cool. Well, if anyone on YouTube or on Facebook who's watching this has some type of experience like that with nature or nature art helping them, go ahead and post that. If you feel okay sharing about that, post it in the comments. That would be really cool to see.
That would be cool.
I mean, that makes me think of so many other things that I want to ask you, but I think we should address this comment that kind of goes back to your origin story a little bit more. Someone on YouTube this is their name. So could you read that comment and see what if you have, it sounds like they're asking for advice.
Yeah. Okay. So they're asking if you had the chance, would you have went to college for more illustrative painting rather than graphic design? I considered graphic design, but I prefer illustration and painting rather than digital. I think that I would have. My school was a really small state school, and my dad was a professor there, so that's why I ended up going there. But they didn't offer an illustration program, so that's one of the reasons that I did graphic design. However, I use my graphic design major every day when I'm trying to take my like hand-drawn work and make it digital and make it like useful for different organizations or companies or whatever. And I feel like it's come in super handy because I'm able to design my own prints and my own like pattern design and everything. And I think a lot of people who have a more like fine art background sometimes struggle with finding a like audience for their work because they can't make it digital quite so easily. So yeah, I don't know. That's a really good question. I think that there are so many resources out there now for making your work digital and making it useful for all sorts of different platforms. So I think that you don't have to go to school for either of those things, honestly, because there are so many great resources out there. And I know a lot of self-taught illustrators. So
Great. That's really cool. And it's so I didn't know that you had this graphic design background, and now maybe it's just hindsight is 2020, but now I'm like looking at your stuff and thinking about your work, and I'm like, oh yeah, now that makes sense.
yeah, it
So
comes in handy, especially like when I'm designing beer cans and stuff, because I think I kind of approach my illustrations as I'm constructing compositions in my head or on a sketchbook. I am able to like, in the same way that you can Photoshop things in different places, I'm able to like cut and paste a little bit in my brain. And I think I don't know, I'm able to just like lay things out in my illustrations to be very like concise and balanced, especially I'm thinking about my maps. And I think that background in graphic design really helped with that.
cool. That's so neat. I think this would be a perfect time to kind of think about how this people can apply this in their nature journals. So maybe you could talk a little bit about your process with your maps, or you mentioned sort of how you build your compositions or think about composition. Like, could you describe a little bit about your process, maybe just specifically about your maps?
Sure. So I think I illustrated my first map as a gift to my parents maybe 5 or 6 years ago. It was a map of the farm that I grew up on where they still live. And they had just created a few really cool little off-grid cabins on the farm that they rent out on Airbnb. And so I wanted to create this like resource for guests to the farm to find their cabin and find like different icons that could inspire them to go exploring around on the farm. So I gave that to them as a gift, and they loved it. They like everything I do, of course, because they're my parents. So I wasn't sure if there was like they were actually good. I was just like, whatever. It was really fun for me to make though. And I really like illustrating super tiny detailed things and like really trying to make it perfect. And so map making really worked out well for my brain, I guess. So that was my first one. And then I created a couple more here and there that were like, one was for a fly fishing company and it was for one of the Finger Lakes. Their company is on one of the Finger Lakes, so they wanted me to illustrate like some of the icons of that region. And slowly different people started to ask me to make these maps, and I had a lot of fun with them. And every time I made one, I felt like it was getting better. So I started to, I like to live in a lot of different places. So I've moved like 8 times in the past couple of years because I like to just immerse myself in cool areas, get to know people around there, and get to know the different hiking places. So one project that I started on my own as a personal project was illustrating different maps of some of my favorite places to hike around West Virginia, which is my home state. And I lived in a few different really beautiful areas over the past couple of years. So every time I moved to a different place, that was like an incentive to get out and talk to people, to hike all the trails that I possibly could, to take a ton of pictures of the plants and animals that I was seeing, and to connect with people that are park rangers in those areas. So I've created 6 maps in that series, and each one is really big, even bigger than the one that I just showed. So most of them are about 22 by 28 or 22 by 30 inches, and they have been super fun for me, and they really have been cool because they connect me to other people that love these places. So it's just really fun to get emails from people that are like, oh, I saw your map and I got engaged at this place in 1980. And like, I just have all these memories attached to them. So yeah, they're really fun for me, really rewarding. And then a little bit of the process behind those. So normally I try to do as much research as I can prior to starting them. So like I said, I do a lot of hiking to prepare, and I take a ton of reference photos. I do some sketching on site too. And then I'll sit down with all of my resources and I'll try to like prioritize things that I think are most iconic or most critical to feature. So if there are any endangered species that are in that can be found in that park or state or national forest, I try to feature those. And also I really take into consideration what people who work there, like the park rangers, think should be featured, because I just figure they know the place so much better than I do. So I normally make a list of like 10 to 15 different places, whether that's like a iconic waterfall or overlook or something, and then also plants, animals. It's fun for me to include a couple different activities, like outdoor recreational activities that people can participate in there, because I like to think of people as being a part of this like fun ecosystem that we don't have to be ruining things. Like we can exist in it in a positive way by trail running and like, you know, just protecting this beautiful place. So yeah, and then I start to sketch everything out, and the sketching process takes a really long time because there are so many elements coming together on one page, and I don't want to overwhelm the viewer. So typically I start on a really small piece of paper, and I'll do 2 or 3 sketches where I try to include all the different elements, and I just roughly sketch them out. And I try to keep the actual map part front and center. So I will look closely. I'll get a big paper map so I can really see all the different trails, and then I just start going to work after I've done a few iterations of sketches. Then I'll get my huge sheet of watercolor paper out, and I have to treat that thing like a baby, because if I make any mistakes, I can still like, it's pen and ink normally first and then watercolor over top. So there's not a lot of forgiveness with pen and ink. So I have to really, before I put down every mark, I want to make sure I have a pencil sketch down. I know exactly what's going down. Yeah, and then pieces just kind of come together. But the sketching process is super important to the map making.
Do you have any examples of those pages where you're doing sort of like the sketching with pencil?
I don't in this room.
Okay.
I could share them maybe in like the comments of on the Facebook page or something.
Yeah, that would be awesome. And then someone on Facebook is asking, oh wait, never mind, that's the wrong one. They're asking, how do you decide what to leave out?
Mm. Normally, I just run out of space, and I also, when I'm laying out these compositions, I try to think about color a lot. So if I have like a bunch of red plants that I want to include, I normally have to pick like 2 or 3 to include instead of all 10, because I don't want to like make it super like an attack on the senses. So I try to pick like a few warmer colored subjects and kind of spread them out around the composition. And typically I keep the map section in the middle, and I'll just include a few icons throughout the map itself. And then I create a border that kind of weaves together a bunch of different elements.
Uh-huh. Okay. And then how do you think, like, if people are doing this, like in their nature journals, and they're maybe going to be like out in the field, like one session, maybe they'll be out there for a couple hours and they want to make a map, and they're inspired by the way you include like multiple elements in the map, but they might not have that much time and that many sort of like draft stages. Like, how would you recommend, like, what can people take without being totally overwhelmed and actually like use it, you think, in the field?
That's a great idea, or great question. I would recommend starting with the map itself. And normally I don't put like all the roads and all of the trails and everything. I put like the main trails, and if there are like visitor centers, I like to include those because those are great points of reference for me and for other people. So I include a few like man-made elements, definitely. And then I would say if you're doing this in your sketchbook, maybe try to limit yourself to like 5 main elements, like 5 plants and animals and little mini landscapes. And yeah, don't overwork it. And I think you can always go back in and kind of add more details later. Like I often will do a sketch on site, and then I'll take photos too, and then I'll reference both when I'm making my final map. But if you want to do it all in the field, I'd recommend just sticking to like 5 different things. And also another idea would be making a theme for it. So it could be like wildflowers of the state park, and just focus on 5 different wildflowers instead of trying to capture everything that makes up what makes this place so amazing.
Right. And then on your map, you could just kind of show like anything that's relevant to the flowers and forget everything else.
Yeah, you could include some pollinators. Yeah, that'd be really fun. I kind of want to do that now.
Nice, cool. I think that was sort of most of the stuff that I had about that I was curious about for maps. It seems like one of the other main things you do is a lot of botanical illustrations. Do you have any of that work around that you could share or talk about?
Sure, yeah, I do have a couple. Let's see. Okay, so this is kind of a textural one that I did recently. So I saw these, a field of lavender that was growing as I was hiking around actually a Hare Krishna temple near my parents' house, which is kind of interesting. So I really like lavender, and it's not a native species to West Virginia, although I think it's considered naturalized or something. But I have been enjoying challenging myself in 2021. Last year, I enjoyed challenging myself to not just looking at the whole subject. Like, for example, before, when I would look at a plant like this, I would want to paint the entire thing and make it look exactly like it looks. And I think last year, I realized that I was getting a little bit bored of that, and I wanted to see things a little differently and like push the limits of that. So I started looking at things super closely, and when I would take reference photos, I would later in my studio crop them so that I was just looking at a really like close-up kind of abstracted version of that subject. And that proved to be a great challenge for me, and also just so fun. And I felt like you can kind of like with this one, you can kind of get rid of your need to make things look exact when you're doing something like this, because it's just kind of like fun and playful. And I even incorporated like, whoa, it's really hard with this angle, but like big chunks of like bold color. So you can see like, big flat colors of green and red and purple. And that's not how I used to work, but it's been really fun, and it's encouraged me to really look at the patterns and textures of nature instead of just trying to make it look exactly like everyone else makes it look.
Yeah, that's really cool. That seems like something that would be really fun to have sort of like if you're working in a journal, you know, like in the front page of your book, or because like that inside cover, a lot of times it has great paper on it, but people usually don't draw anything there, and that would be like such a cool cool way to see it. That's really cool. Could you talk a little bit about your 3x3 challenge and your whole like tiny worlds work that you do?
Yeah. So I think a big part of what I like to do is go to places that I also like to go to really, really cool like places with tons of interesting plants and animals, but I feel like most of the time I'm just kind of in my backyard, or I'm on my parents' farm, or places where I'm very familiar with what I'm seeing. And it's not necessarily like super exciting to me, but I try to like push myself to still see the interest there and make it exciting. So with the 3x3 challenge, which is something that I started doing, I think about 2 years ago, I try to go to places where maybe I wouldn't naturally like notice much. It doesn't look like much. Maybe it's my backyard in an urban setting, and there's just not much that seems like it's there. So I try to look really closely at like a 3x3 foot area of grass or forest floor, and I try to find 3 things, natural objects in that area that I think are interesting, even if they're very common. And then I try to make them into a composition and think about the connections between those 3 natural objects, and maybe if they have any relationship in the ecosystem, or if they maybe blew there randomly and don't really have a connection. I just try to like make something artistic out of 3 random little mundane objects. And I think that's just a fun way to see the world. It's helped me because I feel like when I start to feel like bored, especially during the pandemic, I haven't been able to travel to many places, and I felt sometimes a little like bored with my surroundings, but just finding different exercises to make yourself notice new things, I think is a really nice challenge. And it's a nice way to see the world, because then you are less likely to get bored and ungrateful for your surroundings.
Yeah, that is so cool to hear you say that, because I feel like that's something that I've heard from a lot of people that I've interviewed recently, is how nature journaling and nature art can help you not take things for granted. And especially like you say, now that you can't travel to like, I don't know, like Borneo or like Kilimanjaro or something, where it's hard to take things for granted because you've never seen it before and it's so extreme and exotic. But yeah, like having ways or tools that can help us realize that you don't have to go to Yosemite. You can look at this like thing like in a succulent in a pot and find beauty and wonder there. So that's really cool. Do you have any examples of 3x3 or tiny worlds kind of work?
Let me see. I still store most of my stuff in my parents' house. I don't have a lot there.
Okay.
Let's see. This is only 2 objects, but I did find these 2 objects right next to each other. This was a moose antler and a blueberry plant from Isle Royale, which is one place that I was able to go in the past year. It's a national park in Lake Superior that's super awesome. It's all backcountry and hiking only, so there are no roads. It's really beautiful. So this was just me trying to put 2 things together in a composition that I found in one area. I think that's the only thing that I have.
That's really cool. That seems like a good one for maybe not in that example when you're backpacking in Isle Royale, but like if people, if it's like bad weather or something, or people aren't comfortable nature journaling outside, they can go out and find little objects and even bring those back into their studio and do something like that at home.
Yeah. Yeah, I have in my
cool.
studio, I have all sorts of weird little seed pods and fun things that I found. And it just, I don't know, I like keeping them there because it's like fuel for a rainy day. If I feel uninspired or I can't go outside, I can look at all my little things. And yeah, I try, definitely, I try not to like pick any plants that are already dead. So that is one thing that over the years, I've realized that that's important when you're trying to be a good steward. So
yeah, and in some places you're not allowed to take like antlers and stuff like that also.
Yeah, and I didn't take the antler either. Right. That was claimed by a park ranger.
Oh, really? That's funny.
They just let me take some pictures of it.
All right, cool. So could you talk a little bit about your like what tools you use when you're out in the field and like what kind of paper or media you like most?
Yeah, I have my little nature journaling kit here. So this is a Sendak artist roll from Peg and All, and they're a really cool family that I've never met them, but they seem cool. They live in Philadelphia and they make all handmade art supplies. So I have this little roll, and I like to keep all my stuff very light. I like to pack really light. So normally I don't even take a sketchbook actually when I'm painting or drawing outside because it seems to be too clunky and I know I won't need all of those pages. So this is like a little example of something. This is what I took to Isle Royale. It's just the back of a sketchbook. I just folded it, cut it down to size and folded it. And then I just put a few loose sheets of paper in here because I knew I was only there for like 5 days. So I knew I wouldn't be doing too many things, but I wanted to make sure that I definitely brought some art supplies. So I used Arches watercolor paper and I just folded it in half and cut it to size. And this was actually really nice for me too, because as a professional illustrator, I often, it's a little bit of a bummer that when you make something your career, you like lose some of your energy for it to do it in your free time. But it just kind of like, I knew that was going to happen when I decided to be an illustrator. But so when I go on vacation now, sometimes I'm like, oh, do I even want to like, because I'm doing that every single day during the work day. But every single time, it's so funny because every time I'm like, oh, maybe I shouldn't even bring my art supplies because I need to just like have a break from it. But every time, as soon as I start hiking, I'm like filled with ideas and I'm like, oh my gosh, I need to paint. And so it's kind of cool because it keeps showing me that like this is the right profession for me because I do, even when I'm feeling like burned out, I still get that spark and I want to keep going. But it helps me to have like really small pages because then I'm not like, then I don't feel like I have to spend like the entire day working on something. I can just do a quick little thing. So here are a few from Isle Royale. This was the seaplane that we flew in on because all the ferries were.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, they were all canceled for the year. So that was the only way to get there, and it was pretty awesome. This is a little bunchberry.
Ooh.
Yeah, there were tons.
Can you hold that one up again? I like how you tell me about the lines in the background.
Yeah, I just I never done that before really, but after I painted the main section, I wanted to spruce up the composition, and I remember seeing some like vintage illustrations that kind of had a frame like that, and so I wanted to give it a shot, and I
think it's really cool because I love the way that text can be a visual element.
Yeah.
And the combination of words and images, I think, is at least to my aesthetic, is more beautiful than either one just by itself. And it's really interesting how, in that case, you kind of like, I mean, digitally, or if you have a long time, you can actually put in actual writing and fill in that space. But the way you use those lines, it kind of almost creates that effect. So that's really cool. I'm interviewing this guy. He's called I think he's called the Headless Sketcher on Instagram, and he uses like cursive in the background, and he has all this kind of like scribbly looking stuff that forms into like really precise looking animals and nature subjects, and he uses the words and the writing very strongly as a visual element. So that piece was really interesting example of that. And also that's really cool the way you carry the loose leaf like that. I think that's pretty neat. Maybe some people can get some ideas from that.
Yeah, I really like it. Like I said, I can use my really nice paper, and you can get like 4 different paintings out of 1 sheet of Arches paper, which is a little more expensive. Here's a little landscape from Isle Royale and a blue bead lily. So something, as I, like right after you asked me to do this interview, I was thinking about how I feel sometimes like some imposter syndrome when I look at the Nature Journal Facebook page, and I think probably a lot of people do, because there are so many people that are connecting to nature in different ways. Sometimes it's visually, sometimes it's like just journaling about what they're seeing. I think on the Nature Journal page, there are a lot of people who are using like numerical information and tracking like the stars and different things like that.
Yeah.
And I think because I have an art background, some of that feels a little bit like overwhelming to me. And I just kind of wanted to say, like, I feel like it's fun to think about how we all connect with nature in different ways, and like there's no one right way to nature journal. And like as I was getting my stuff together, I was like, oh no, I don't, like sometimes I feel like this isn't real nature journaling because I'm not combining, like I'm not making these like big pages that have tons of information on them. They're kind of like little pages with different info. But then when they come together, it's helping me understand the world around me. So it's still nature journaling. It's just a little bit different. And so, yeah, if there's anyone listening that ever feels like they're not nature journaling the right way, I just want to encourage you that I feel the same way. And it's just cool because it just shows how we're all wired differently. And even though I don't naturally gravitate towards the numbers, or it's inspiring to me and makes me want to like try to, at some point, incorporate that into my practice, because I think, who knows, maybe that is a way that I can learn too. So
yeah, well, thanks for sharing that bit of honesty and like vulnerability. I think sometimes it's hard to share those things, and when people like you say that, then other people are like, oh my gosh, Rosalie was a teacher at Wild Wonder and she said she had imposter syndrome.
thank you.
Yeah, that's really great. And that's one thing I really, and this is going to segue into my next question for you, but I really think that when we can learn from really diverse sources, then we can grow and create real, I mean, all creativity is a remix in some ways, you know, there's not really anything totally new, but it's like, if you're just looking at 1 or 2 people that are in your own field as your sources of inspiration, there's, you know, that's okay. But like for the Nature Journal show, I like to bring in people who are doing some different stuff or like approaching it from different ways. And when you can synthesize those diverse things, I think that's where some real amazing stuff comes out. It seems like people really appreciate your comment about that. So thanks for sharing. On that note, you know, what have been some of your you know, visual influences? Like obviously nature is a huge visual influence in your specific bioregion, and you have a graphic design background, but are there other people or schools or things in nature that are visual inspirations for you or influences?
Yeah, I think that some of the people that are really inspiring to me are not necessarily nature illustrators. They just have a really cool grasp on watercolor or pen and ink. I'm thinking of Lucy Engelman, who lives in Pittsburgh, and she does a wide variety of illustrations, but she has amazing pen and ink work. I think she mostly uses pen and ink, so you should look her up. She's really cool. And you know, it's hard for me to like pinpoint single inspirations because I feel like everyone's style is really just a combination of things that they've seen over the years that they have said, "Ooh, I really like that." And then that kind of tucks away in their brain and they incorporate little bits of all these different inspirations, and that comes together to form your style. So I like what you just said about having a lot of different sources of inspiration. I think that's great for when you're like trying to determine your like what to focus on in nature journaling, but also when it comes to finding your artistic style, it's really important to look at so many different people's work. There was a time, I think in like early college, when I felt like I had no like artistic style at all. And I was very, very self-conscious about that because I was looking at all these illustrators and I could like immediately tell that that was their work. And I just felt like my work didn't have that consistency. And I remember emailing my dad, and because he's an artist too, and just saying, I don't have a style. And he looked at my work and he was like, oh, you have a style. You just don't see it yet, but eventually you'll see it. And yeah, it just, oh, also I was going to say, during that time, I decided that I was like scared to look at other artists' work because I thought, like, I don't want to copy anyone's work because I don't want to like be stealing their thunder at all. So I didn't really understand how I could look at and admire other people's work without copying it. And so for a while, I just decided, like, I deleted my Instagram and I said, I'm not gonna like look at other artists' work because I need it to be like genuinely me. And then I realized, I think I like listened to a podcast and they were talking about how that's a terrible idea. Because then you have like no inspirations and you just are like trying to pull something out of nothing. So yeah, I think it's important to have a wide variety of inspirations artistically, and just also just to like enjoy a lot of different hobbies and allow yourself to be inspired by all sorts of different things. Like if you just focus on trying to get super, super good at nature journaling and all you do is nature journal, I think your work won't be as rich as if you also have other hobbies and talk to other people that have other passions. And yeah.
Yeah, that's really cool. Man, this is really exciting me. I think I'm going to need to do like some kind of episode, maybe with like multiple people all at the same time, and talk about this like question of style. I know that like in fine art studies, it comes up a lot. And maybe in the nature journaling community, it doesn't come up that much, but it's so interesting. I just want to share this comment with you. Liz G really likes your style, so thanks.
My 19-year-old self would be so happy to hear that. She really didn't think that she had a style.
And then here's another one. It makes me want to talk about this a lot more, but this person's using this term cross-training, and I like thinking about this too with nature journaling. I think specifically is inherently cross, like you mentioned, you know, people who are doing stuff with numbers, people who are like scientifically trained and like tracking the solstice and getting like really in depth with stuff, and or people who are like really amazing birders, and people who are doing stuff like your sort of textural study with that lavender. It's almost like some kind of like Matisse type thing, you know, where it's like there's not like depth, it's just like all about the texture and the colors and the shapes. And I love the term cross training, to think of like how you can go and put yourself and do these different things, like go on a birding trip, or go do, like you mentioned, ceramics, which is even like pushing your brain further into like a real three-dimensional world. But yeah, I love that concept. So I can't tell who all these people are when they post in Facebook, doesn't have the name, but love that term. And there's a couple more things that there's more things that I want to ask you about, but I think we should go into the lightning round here, because I think that'd be really fun. So I'm gonna start the lightning round. Are you ready for it?
Ready.
Okay, great. All right, so starting off with some easy questions. Is coffee an essential art supply?
Absolutely, 100%. Coffee, tea, I just like, because I work from home, I have to like mix up my life somehow. So every like hour, I'm making a new fun beverage. I noticed your little coffee cup. I really like that.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So on that note, do you have a wild studio or a tidy studio?
Well, I kind of have two studios. So my mom is my shipping assistant. So I run an Etsy shop and I also wholesale artwork to a lot of different independent shops. And so at her house, in her basement, she has all of my shipping stuff, and she's my shipping lady, which is such a blessing because I was drowning in like trying to keep up with client work and everything and still shipping things out. She says she likes it, so I'm happy with that. So that section is kind of messy because that has like also a lot of my like stored art supplies that I'm not currently using, like big clunky easels and tripods and all that stuff. So I kind of put all of my messy stuff at my parents' house. And then at my house, I have a very tidy studio. And it's funny, when I got my first studio about 5 or 6 months ago, this was my first time having my own separate room for just art. I thought that I was gonna wanna like pin up a lot of inspirations and make it really fun to be in there, but I really liked having a very serene studio space that feels like a blank canvas. So whatever project I'm working on, it just like, I can only focus on that, and I don't have like a lot of clutter on the walls. And I try to clean up my desk after work every single day and put everything away, because it just kind of helps me approach the next day feeling a little more on top of things.
Yeah, that's really cool. I've heard this term clearing to neutral, like this idea that like in your kitchen or your studio, clearing things to neutral helps you start a new project. Yeah, so that's cool. It's
definitely true for me.
That's interesting how you went through that process and of learning around that. Do you have friends who love art as much as you?
Yes, I do. Yeah, I think being from a very rural state, like I said, there are not very many artists, but the ones that are there in West Virginia we find each other. There's a really cool network called the Tamarack Foundation, and it connects artists from around the state. So even if we don't see each other in person very often, we cheer each other on from afar, and we're all kind of in the same boat of making an artistic career in a very rural, mountainous state, and so that kind of bonds us all together. So I have a lot of really awesome friends in West Virginia that are doing really cool stuff.
Cool. Okay, next one. Would you rather nature journal from the perspective with the eyes of a 9-year-old or a 99-year-old?
I love this question. I would have to say probably a 9-year-old, because I feel like 99-year-olds have seen so much. And I do think the older you get, the more a lot of people appreciate things, because they realize like this might be the last, if you're 99, it might be the last time you ever see a tree. You might want to paint it. But a 9-year-old, I think 9-year-olds are just so cool. I love that age group. And they just see things with such excitement. So, yeah.
Okay, cool. All right, so you are going to be stuck on a deserted island, and you can only bring 5 art supplies with you. What would you take?
I would take a Micron pen.
Which size? And
0.5.
Okay.
Yep. I would take this little paint palette, green leaf and blueberry, because it's very earth toned and has everything I need. I would take probably a Moleskine mixed media sketchbook. I would take Princeton watercolor brushes. And I would probably take a camera so that I could, like, if it was raining, I could paint from photos.
Okay, nice. And then that way, if you get off the desert island, you'll have all these pictures of what you saw.
Exactly.
All right. If you could nature journal or make art with any historical figure, who would you want to do it with?
I think Maria Sabia Marian. I'm saying her name. She's a Spanish artist and naturalist from, I believe, the 1600s, and she created the most amazing illustrations, super vibrant, and she explored all of these far-fetched places all over the world with her daughter, and I just think that's so cool that the 2 women in that era were able to have the guts to like go to these really cool places and observe a lot of plants and animals for other people had observed them before, but she documented them for Westerners for the first time. And yeah, her work is just so.
Yeah, she is awesome, and I can't believe more people don't know about her. You know, I talked to Stephanie Dole, the beetle lady, not that long ago. We did a show how to nature journal bugs, and Stephanie Dole is sort of on a mission to like let more people know about this woman and her work. And it's like, when you think about what that time period is, so long ago, that's like before Darwin. I mean, that is just, and when you think about like what's going on in the world and like with gender and women and stuff like that, it's just absolutely incredible what she did. So wow,
I also really like her because she grew up, her dad, I believe, had a fine arts school. And so she grew up being around all of these artists in training. And so she was classically trained, but she like learned a lot. So they would paint these still lives of flowers. And the way, from what I've read, she noticed that like there would be bugs that would fly in the window and want to like hang out on certain flower bouquets as they were painting. And she was just fascinated by the interaction between those things. And I think that kind of motivated her to get out into nature and see things in their natural elements. So I kind of resonate with that as someone who has an artistic background and was like not classically trained, but a little bit more so. And then throughout my life, just started to develop this curiosity for nature. And yeah.
Cool. Okay. If you could nature journal anywhere on Earth, where would you want to go?
Oh man. I think I really want to go to a desert to nature journal, to a desert that has growing things. Because I've been to the Wadi Rum Desert in Jordan, and there was nothing growing. So it was still amazing, super beautiful, but I was having trouble finding things to paint other than just like landscapes. So it'd be fun I've never been to a desert that has cacti and cool little creepy crawlies and stuff. So
cool. Yeah, that sounds really awesome. Okay, last question for the lightning round. If you could have a nature journaling superpower, what would it be? Or art superpower?
I think it would be to not attach my feelings of like self-worth to the outcome of my art. I think that, I know that's probably heavier than you expected, but I think I'm very affected. Like if I have a nature journaling session or I've been working all day on a painting and it's not turning out, it kind of affects my mood the rest of the day. And I think it would be really nice to just be able to like create without feeling like it has to be perfect. I think that's something that I'm constantly pushing back on, because I know you could always put more time and you could always make it better, but in the end, it's really about the process and what you're learning along the way and how it's communicating ideas. So it doesn't need to be the most incredible thing you've ever created. Yeah, I think just being a little more content when I have not so good creating sessions would be awesome.
Wow, that I've never had an answer like that before.
Really?
Usually people are like, I want to be able to like fly around and see all of the animals, or I want to have like binocular vision and x-ray vision. I can like zoom in and out, or like
those would also be great.
Perfect color matching. Some people want to have just like perfect match every color just perfectly, and things like that. So yours was so much more psychological and very interesting, because like if you don't have that part figured out, it doesn't matter what all of your other things are, you probably wouldn't create anything. So yeah. Wow, great answer to that one. So good job in the lightning round. All right, so there's been, during the lightning round, there's all of these questions and stuff. So let's try to address some of these questions and comments people had. So first, someone was curious who the pen and ink artist was that you mentioned. I think you mentioned someone from Pennsylvania, Lucy, maybe something.
Lucy Engelman.
Lucy Engelman. Okay, so for
illustrations for Popular Science, I believe, and some other fun magazines. She does a lot of great infographics that are all hand drawn.
Okay, and what's her last name? How's it spelled?
I think it's Engelman.
There's another Lucy who does really cool stuff. Lucy Knisley, Knisley, and she does these like recipe books. And it's basically like a nature journal page, but it's like recipes, and she shows all and sort of like comics at the same time. She's amazing. And then someone else asked about your earth tone, your blueberry, and what your earth tone paint kit.
Yeah, it's Green Leaf and Blueberry. I believe they also taught at Wild Wonder Nature Journaling Conference.
Yeah.
I just really like homemade watercolors. I use all sorts of supplies. I'm not like attached to any one brand, but I really like handmade watercolors by independent artists because I think a lot of the time they're also watercolorists, so they really understand how to compose a palette in a way that's going to set you up for success as a watercolorist because they like pair colors so well and so artistically. Yeah, so I really like that palette. I think it's the Jagged Horizons set. Very beautiful.
Cool. And then another question was, wow, okay. There was a lot of commenting happening during the lightning round. Okay, someone is asking if you're gonna do another Skillshare class.
Yes. Yep, I am. That's in the works, and I think the next one will be super fun. My plan is, as long as everything goes as planned, I plan to bring in a biologist to go on a hike with as we're filming, and then I will teach how to illustrate the things that we're seeing, and they'll be able to give a much more informed explanation of what we're seeing.
Wow.
So yeah, that's my plan for in the next few months. I'm really excited about it.
That sounds really cool. And let's see, there's some other ones of these I just want to address before these people like go away or something. Someone asked if you have any recommendations about doing residencies.
Yeah. So there are a ton of artist residencies out there. Most national parks have them, and a lot of independent arts organizations have them. Some colleges have them. And basically, there's always an application process. So I would just Google artist residencies, nature themed maybe, or like outdoor artist residencies in parks. Some even like county parks or state parks have them. And most of the time, they don't pay you to do residencies, but they offer you housing, free housing, and then they just like, it's fun because you get an insider's look at what it's like to maybe be a ranger there. You can go out sometimes on like different projects with park rangers. I did an artist residency at Great Smoky Mountains National Park, and then with the Audubon Society at Hog Island in Maine. And then I did one at New River Gorge, which is a new national park in West Virginia that just became a national park last month. So that's pretty exciting.
Wow.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay, so I think that covers most of the recent questions. And then I have a few more little themes here that I wanted to cover. What kind of advice would you have for people who are kind of just getting started with this, don't have as much of a art background or maybe even as much of a nature background as you do? Like, what are some sort of practical tips, but also philosophical tips for them?
Yeah, I would say, like I said before, like there's no right way to nature journal, and try to just connect with what you're seeing in whatever way feels natural to you. So if sometimes people get stressed out by doing art, I teach a lot of workshops, and sometimes art is just not for everyone. I think everyone can do art and can enjoy it, but it's not going to be something that everyone enjoys. So I would say don't force it. If it's just really, really frustrating for you and you keep trying and it just like you're not liking it, then maybe you could try journaling, like writing out observations, or maybe like nature photography is a way that you can become more mindful in the outdoors and connect to the things around you. So I would say don't force anything. Definitely try it a few times to see if you like it. And then take advantage of free resources out there. There's so many great books. They're not free, but they're not that expensive. And Skillshare is a super great resource. And even there are really cool podcasts that can get you motivated. So yeah, I Google nature journaling. Google's my best friend. That's how I've learned everything I know. So.
Okay, what about for young people? You know, I mean, in the actual nature journaling community, I think you and I are both on the young end of the spectrum, but like for even younger people, and I think it's really cool. Like one of the reasons why I was really excited to have you on here is sort of like a role model and like a younger person like that can inspire some of the like teens or younger people who look and sometimes they see their mom or their grandma nature journaling and they're like, I don't know about that. So do you have any advice or motivation for younger people?
I would say I would say you could make it whatever you want it to be. So you could even like, if you feel like you're not super into the like florals or something like, and you want like a little more energy to your work, you could even do like nature journaling collages, where you like cut up magazines and use that to like incorporate some fun texture into what you're doing. Let's see. I don't know if do you know of any nature journaling clubs for like high schoolers?
Oh, not yet, but that would be, I think it's still, I only know like 3 or 4 people who are teens that are nature journaling.
Mm-hmm. I would say there are probably a lot more people like teens nature journaling than you think,
Yeah.
but maybe they're not like advertising that they do it. I know I did so much art as a middle school and high schooler, but I just didn't have social media, so I didn't share it with anyone. So there are probably people out there that really enjoy it. Maybe you could host a meetup sometime.
That would be great to have a club for teen nature journalers. Okay, cool. Well, those are great bits of advice. And then, so the one thing that I wanted to ask, the last thing that I wanted to ask is like, what do you think the future of nature journaling is, or like or the type of work that you're doing, like where do you see it going in the future, and what role do you see it playing?
Honestly, I did not even know that there was such a strong nature journaling community until like 2 years ago when I found the Facebook group and I was invited to be a part of Wild Wonder. And then I was like, my mind was blown that there were so many people that enjoyed doing what I enjoy doing. And I think a lot of people that have stumbled upon this community are very just like amazed, because you think you're the only one that's like seeing all these incredible textures and wanting to paint random little mushrooms. But there are so many people out there that also share this appreciation. I think it's going to continue to grow. Like, I think, especially with the pandemic and a lot of people being forced to like stay at home and do kind of quiet, solitary indoor or backyard activities, I think more and more people are looking to find ways to be more mindful. And I think it really goes hand in hand with mindfulness. I've seen so many books come out lately on mindfulness. And I think that nature journaling is an activity that forces you to be still and quiet and just observe and reflect. And I think it's just going to continue to grow as people seek out ways to be creative and have fun that's not tied to a screen. I think a lot of people are feeling a lot of screen fatigue, especially after all of the Zoom calls from this last year. So more people are going to be seeking out hobbies related to the outdoors and related to art, I think.
Cool. That is awesome, and really inspiring. So where can people find out more about you, or what do you have like exciting that you want people to check out? There's a bunch of people asking questions about like your stuff and your artwork. Like, where would you send people?
I would say go to my website. So it's rosaliehaizlett.com. Wow, you're very fast. And yeah, I have all the links to my Skillshare classes there, as well as some super exciting new resources that are coming out that are all about observing and painting from nature. That's going to be coming out this year. So stay tuned. There's a lot coming out this year. And yeah, I also post a lot on Instagram, and you can find all of those details there. But yeah.
Great. Well, this has been super fun, and thanks for everybody on Facebook and YouTube who joined in. This has been great. And Rosalie, thank you so much for taking the time. Maybe we can do
fun. I'm so happy to finally meet you after a bunch of your videos and everything. It's very cool to connect with you. So thanks everyone for coming.
Yay, yeah. And for everybody who is watching at home, we'll end the broadcast with that.